Welcome back, everybody, to another Swift programming language tutorial. This is part 8 of our basics series, and in this tutorial we're going to go over arrays. An array is an ordered list of values of the same type and uses square bracket syntax. We have a whole bunch of examples to get through, so let's go ahead and get started. To create a basic array, you can use the var reserved word or keyword, then give your array a name, then use the single equal sign for assignment, and then in square brackets you put your values. Now recall that we said that array values are all of the same type, and this is an example of an array with the implicit type of integer. You can also create an array, like in this example, with an explicit type stated. Just remember that to state the type for an array, after your variable name here, use a colon, and then put the type in square brackets, and then use your assignment, and then again in square brackets put your values. To create an empty array, there's several different ways to do that. One way looks like this. So we use the var keyword, then give your array a name, use the single equal sign for assignment, and then in square brackets you put your type, and then remember after the square brackets to use a set of round brackets. Okay? So that's one way to create an empty array. Another way looks like this. And the difference here is after your variable name, you use a colon, then you put your type inside the square brackets, and then you assign a set of empty square brackets. So this is an empty array of the type string. Another way, and a less common way that you might not see very often, uses syntax that looks like this. So after the array name, we use a colon, then we use the word array with the capital A, then we use our angle brackets, and inside the angle brackets you put your type, then you assign the word array again using the round brackets. To access elements of an array, you can use the subscript syntax. So here we have an array with the values A, B, C, D, and E. And if we want to access the first element in that array, remember that the array's index starts at 0. So A would be 0, B would be 1, C would be 2, D would be 3, and E would be 4. To access the first element, which is A, we can use the subscript syntax here and put in index 0. So if we run this, you can see down here in the console, we referenced array 4, or we use the name of the variable, and then we use the subscript syntax, and then we put in the number of the index we wanted. The first one is 0, which is A, and we get back A in the console. You can also use your range syntax here inside the square brackets, and you can access a number of elements in an array. So in this case, we're using range syntax inside the square bracket subscript syntax, and we want to access elements 0 through 2. So that would be 0, 1, 2. So that would be A, B, and C. So let's go ahead and run this, and we should get A, B, and C down here in the console. And we do. Okay? Next up, let's go over several different ways that you can append to an array. So here we have created an empty array. We've given it the name array5. And to append one element, you use this syntax. So you use the name of the variable of the array, then a dot to append the element, and inside the round brackets. Since this array allows values of type string, we put a string element. Okay, so that appended element 1 to our array. If you would like to append several elements, you can use this syntax. So again, reference the array variable name, use a dot, then use append, and inside the round brackets, use contents of. And if you're going to append several elements, you can go ahead and just put in another array. So we're going to append the array elements 2 and 3 to this array here, array5, which already has one element in it with the string 1. So it now contains 1, 2, and 3. And yet another way that you can append elements uses this compound assignment operator syntax, which is a plus and an equals. So again, we use the array5 variable name, then we use our compound assignment operator, and then we put the elements that we want to append in an array. So in this case, we have added the elements 4 and 5. So in the first case, we used append and we added one element. Then the second case, we used append with the contents of. And then for the contents of, we used an array and we appended elements 2 and 3. And then for the third case, we used the compound assignment operator with an array with the elements we want to add or append, and we added elements 4 and 5. So with these three different ways, we have added elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So when we use a print to display the contents of array 5, we should have all of those elements in our array now that we created here initially. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see down here in the console, all of those elements have been added to our array 5. Next up, let's go over some ways to insert elements into an array. So here we have created an array with just one element of the type integer, and that element is the number 1. To insert an additional element, we can use our variable name, array6, and then a dot to access the insert, and inside the insert round brackets, we specify the element we want to insert, which is the number 2, and then here we tell it where we want to insert it. So we want to insert the number 2 into array 6 at index 1. So remember, the first index in the array is index 0, which is currently where this number 1 is, and the second index is index 1. So this syntax should insert number 2 after number 1, okay? If you would like to insert several elements, you can use this syntax. So you reference the variable name, use a dot to access the insert, and inside the insert round brackets, we use the contents of for the argument name, and then inside the square brackets, we put the contents that we want to insert, and then we tell it where we want to insert it. So we already inserted 2 after this first one here at index 1, and we're going to insert these numbers here, 3, 4, and 5, after the number that we inserted here. So when it's all said and done, now we should have array 6 with the elements 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let's go ahead and run it. And you can see down here in the console, we get the elements of array 6, which are now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you would like to remove an element from an array, you can use this syntax. So we created our array with the elements A, D, B, C, and D. And let's say that we want to remove this D. So to do that, we can use our array7 variable name, use a dot to access the remove, and inside the remove round brackets, tell it what index we want to remove. A is index 0, and the element we want to remove is index 1, so we put in a 1. So now, this array should include A, B, C, and D with D removed. Let's use our print to display the contents of array 7. Let's run it. And you can see we have A, B, C, and D. Next up, let's go over a few different ways to change elements in an array. So here we have array 8 with the elements A, C, C, D, and E. And let's say that we want to change this C here to a B. Now to do that, we can use this syntax here. So we reference array 8, and then we use the subscript syntax. And since we want to change this C, which is index 1, we put in a 1 in our subscript syntax. And then we use an assignment, and we assign the new value, B. So let's use a print to display the new contents. Remember, before we had A, C, C, D, and E. And we changed this C to a B, so now we should have A, B, C, D, and E. And you can see down here in the console, we get what we expected. Now you can also change several different elements of an array using the range syntax inside the subscript. So here's an example of that syntax. So once again, we reference the array name, then we use our subscript syntax, and inside the square brackets, we use our range syntax here. So in this example, what we want to do is we want to change the first 3 elements of this array to be X, Y, and Z. So let's go ahead and run this and show you what we get. Okay, so before we had an array with the elements A, C, C, D, and E, we use our range subscript syntax to replace the first three elements with X, Y, and Z. And you can see down here in the console, array 8 now consists of X, Y, Z, D, and E. Now you can go even further with that, and let's say that you wanted to replace the entire contents of this array with just these contents here. Now to do that, all you have to do is change your range. So the current range for this array is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we can change this range from 0 to 4. And even though the numbers don't match up, it's still going to replace the entire contents of this array with the new contents that we specify here. So let's go ahead and run this and show you. Array 8 now consists of just the values X, Y, and Z. Next up, we have a simple example of how to combine two arrays. So we have created two arrays here, array 9 and 10. Array 9 has the values 1, 2, 3, and array 10 has the values 4, 5, 6. So we have created a new variable here, and we just use array 9, and then we use a plus sign, and then we use array 10. So array 11 should now consist of the values of both array 9 and 10. Let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. And you can see we get the combined values of array 9 and 10 down here in the console. Next up, let's go over a few different ways to sort an array. So here we have array 12 with the values 1 through 10. However, you can see that the values are currently out of order. Now, one way to show these values in order, in this case, we're just going to use a print, and we're going to reference array 12, and then we're going to use a dot, and then we're going to access sorted. Now, what this sorted function will do is it will sort these values. However, it won't change the original array, and we'll show you an example of that. But first, let's go ahead and run this and show you that the sorted function does indeed sort the values. You can see the output here in the console of array 12 sorts the values smallest to largest. Now let's uncomment this print here, and let's just print the contents of array 12. And what you'll notice is that the original order of array 12 has not changed. Here, okay? Let's comment out these prints. In other cases, you may want to sort in place, and you may want to change the order of your array. So in order to do that, we can use this syntax here. So what we've done is we've referenced array 12, we use a dot, and then we access the sort function. So now here, when we use a print to display the contents of array 12, since we used the sort instead of the sorted, we should now see array 12 sorted from smallest to largest. Let's go ahead and run it. And you can see the output down here in the console. Now we have array 12 sorted smallest to largest. Next, let's go over an example of how to sort an array in reverse. One way to do that is you can use this syntax. So we've used an array, and inside the array round brackets, we reference our array, then we use a dot, then we use the sorted function, and then we use another dot, and we use the reverse function. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see here we have our array displayed in reverse sorted order. Now, I believe there's another way to do this, so let's go ahead and try this out. Let's use this array 12 sort and a print, and let's see if we can put an angle bracket in here, which is equivalent to the greater than, and see if this will sort in reverse as well. Let's run it. Now this is giving us a warning that we need to put in by here, so let's try that. Okay, so that seems to work, which actually is probably a little bit easier than doing it this way. So those are two ways to reverse sort an array. and you can see that it worked down here in the console. Here we have another example of how you could just reverse an array without sorting it, and you can see the syntax for that here. And you could probably also do something similar to what we showed you here, but let's go ahead and run this. And you can see that the contents of array 13, which was E, D, C, B, and A, is now A, B, C, D, and E. Next up, let's say that you wanted to count the elements in this array. We can do that by just simply using the dot count. Okay, so we referenced our array variable name, and then we use dot count. We put this inside of a print, so let's go ahead and run this, and we should get back 10. We get back 10, we're good to go. Next up, let's go over how you could find the largest or maximum values in an array, as well as the smallest or minimum values. Now, one thing to note, ignore this if-let syntax for now. We're just doing that to get rid of a warning, but we will go over if-let when we cover optionals in future tutorials. Okay? So here we have an array, array 15, with several values, and here we have another array, array 16, with several values. And the syntax that you want to pay attention to when you want to find the largest or the smallest is this dot max and this dot min. So let's go ahead and run this and show you that when you use your array name and then a dot and max, or your other array name and a dot and min, you will get back the maximum number and the minimum number in each of those arrays. So for this array 15, the max is 1000, and for this array 16, the minimum is negative 112. So let's run that, and we should get back 1000 and negative 112. Okay, and you can see we get back what we expected. We're good to go. Next up, let's go over an example of how you can change a string into an array. To do that, you can use this syntax here. So we use the array, and inside the array around brackets, we reference our string variable. You use a dot, and then you use characters. So let's go ahead and run this. And you can see down here in the console, we get an array with the individual elements of string 1. Next up, we have an example of how to iterate over an array. So we have created our array here with the values A, B, C, D, and E. And in this example, we just want to loop over those values and then display those values along with an index number. And in this case, instead of starting the index at 0, we've gone ahead and added a 1. So we can start the index at 1. And to get the values of this array with their index to enumerate them, we use this enumerated function. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. And you can see down here in the console, we have each element of array 17 along with an index value. Now just a quick note, we haven't covered for loops yet, but we will be going over loops and all the cool things you can do with loops in the very near future. Next, let's go over a few different ways that you can sum elements of an array. So here we have our array. We have 3 number values, 5, 5, and 5. Now we can quickly add that up in our head and see that it should be 15. But if we want to create some code to sum this for us, we can use this code here. So to start, we start out with an empty, not technically an empty, but a variable set to 0. Then we use a for loop to iterate over or to loop through the values of this array, and it will look at each one. So it'll see 5, 5, and 5. Then we use our original value that we created here, and then we use our plus equals syntax, which is our compound assignment operator, which I like to think of as a running total. And then we use the I, which is each element of this array as it loops through. So as the for loop loops through this array and it encounters a new value, it will add it to this variable here. So the first time through, it will add 5, and that will become 5. The next time through, it will add another 5, and that will become 10. And then the next time through, it will add another 5 and become 15. So let's go ahead and use this print here, and let's put in our sum. and that value should now be 15. Let's go ahead and run it. And you can see down here in the console, using the for loop, we get back our expected sum of array 18, which is 15. Now if we put in 2 more 5s, let's run it again, and we should get back 25. And we do. We're good to go. Another way to sum the elements of an array uses this syntax here. So in this example, we've used the reduce function. So we reference our array 18, then we use a dot, and we access the reduce, and inside the reduce round brackets, it takes 2 arguments. The first argument is the value to use as the initial accumulating value, so we want to go ahead and start that out at 0, similar to what we did here in this example. And then we use a type of closure inside the curly bracket syntax here to go ahead and add all those values up together. And we will be doing a tutorial on closures in the near future. But let's comment out this original print and just leave this print, and let's go ahead and run this. And using the reduce and the closure, you can see down here in the console we get the correct sum for array 18, which is 25. In this example, what we want to do is we want to add each element at the same index in each of these 2 arrays together. Okay, so we want to add this 1 and this 2 and this 3 and this 4 and this 5, and so on. Now to do that, we can use a loop. So we can loop through the different values of each of those arrays, and then we use our zip function here, and that in a sense will zip those 2 array values up together at each index that is the same. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. So you can see down here in the console we get 3, which is this 1 and 2 added together. Then we get 5, which is this 2 and this 3 added together. Then we get 7, which is this 3 and 4. 9, which is this 4 and 5. 11, which is this 5 and 6, and 100, which is this 53 and 47. Next up, we have an example to test an array to see if it contains an element, a specific element. So here we have array 21, which currently consists of the values a and b. Now if we want to test that array to see if it contains a c, what we can do is we can reference the array variable name, and then use a dot, and then use contains, and inside the contains round brackets, put the element that you want to test for. So in this case, we're going to test for C. We can clearly see that C is not in this array, so we should get back false. Okay, so you can see down here in the console, we get back false. In our last example, we want to check to see if an array is empty. So here we have created an empty array, and then we use an if-else statement, and to check to see if an array is empty, you just reference the array variable name, and then use a dot, and then you use isEmpty. So in this case, if the array is empty, we want to display a message that says array 22 is empty, and then we want to use an else if it's not empty to say array 22 is not empty. So we can see that this is currently empty, so let's go ahead and run this. And we get back the correct message, array 22 is empty. But now if we put in a number, an int, because this array is of type int, we should get back this message, array 22 is not empty. Let's run it. And you can see we get back array 22 is not empty. Okay, so that's all we have for this tutorial on the basics of arrays. We will be doing many more Swift tutorials in the near future. Join us for those, and we'll see you next time.